Well, hello there, you're watching the press preview, a first look at what is on the front pages. Time then to see what's making the headlines with the journalist and broadcaster Jenny Kleeman and the political commentator Benedict Spence with us from now until midnight. Welcome to both of you. Front pages, let's take a peek then, shall we? Starting with the Eye. After the Home Secretary's speech to the Tory Poddy conference, the Eye has this headline: Braverman's hardline job application to become Tory leader. Well, the Times focuses on her remarks that a hurricane of millions of migrants is coming to Britain. In the Daily Mail, columnist Quentin Letts praises her speech as the best one seen at conference for years. The Mirror, though, looks ahead to Rishi Sunak's leader speech tomorrow and reminds him that his party has so far had 13 years to put the country right. The Guardian says the PM will say in his speech that politics is broken and that voters are exhausted by party infighting. His pledge to change that broken political system is also the lead story for the Daily Telegraph. It's justice for Jade. The Metro leads with a law change, which is coming after a woman was murdered by her husband, who then repeatedly contacted her family. Such killers will now be stripped of their parental rights. The Financial Times reports on a worldwide sell-off in the financial bond market as dealers are spooked by fears of higher interest rates. And finally, the Daily Star tells us that AI chatbots are apparently not quite the threat to our existence that many people fear and could actually help us live longer. That if they don't murder us first. Not quite sure what that part is about. A reminder, scan the QR code you'll see on screen during the programme. You can check out the front pages of the papers while you watch us. She checks her list to see if you're picking the star. I'm not sure you are. Welcome to both of you. Hello. Joined, as you can see, by the journalist and broadcaster Jenny Kleeman and the political commentator Benedict Spence. Lots to discuss, not least what Rishi Sunak is going to say tomorrow. Starting with the Daily Mirror, today the PM will blame our country's problems on the political system, but remind us, Rishi, how many years have the Tories had to fix Britain?
This would be a problem for any Conservative leader, any leader, incumbent leader after 13 years of government. But Rishi Sunak has particular challenges tomorrow. He's going to be talking in front of a crowd of party faithful who didn't vote for him to be leader. He'll be talking in a former train station about the cancellation of HS2, and the crowd will be possibly dwindling compared to today because there's a train strike on tomorrow. So lots of the people... I was on a train coming back from Manchester to London today, and it was full of people who'd been at the Conservative Party conference who were leaving so they could get home early on the train. So he may not have as many people in the audience as he would like, and the people who are there, we know, voted for Liz Truss rather than him a year ago. But yes, it is a conference that has been overshadowed by HS2, which has derailed, if you excuse the pun, everything, all the messaging, if there was any messaging, that the Conservatives were trying to put out. There have been, you know, there always are little tidbits of what's going to be in the speech that are in the papers. But it's not been a very good conference so far for Rishi Sunak. He was sort of irritated today when he was being asked about HS2 on the few bits of broadcast that he did do, as if it was a real impertinence to be asked. And then we get the announcement this evening that yes, it's the leg to Manchester, Birmingham to Manchester leg is going to be cancelled.
Not speedy.
Not speedy. Yes, this is another example of this kind of, you know, the trains will be high speed, but the track will not be, or whatever.
If you close your eyes and you make zooming noises, and, you know, maybe you'll get there sooner, but, you know, that's kind of how things go in this country right now. Maybe there won't be blackouts in the wintertime if you just believe it enough. These people can't help themselves. Honestly, it's so depressing, actually, to sort of be sitting here ostensibly on the right of the political divide and looking and thinking, right, what is the Conservative Party supposed to stand for? Law and order, for stability, for sort of accountability. And there's just a complete void of it. And the ironic thing is, I understand that why Rishi Sunak isn't particularly popular, but he is probably the most, of all of the potential candidates to be leader, he's probably the one that embodies those things the most, and they absolutely loathe him for it. This does feel like it's the sort of, it's the last bell sort of tolling for his premiership. People literally, as Jenny said, leaving ahead of it because it doesn't really matter. They assume he's not going to be leader. We've spent all of this conference so far talking about who else is going to be leader, the starting gun, and he hasn't even made his speech yet. And you just think, honestly, the party doesn't want to be in power anymore. It's depressing.
Well, let's fill the void for you, shall we?
Let's do that.
OK, right-hand column of the Times. Choose me for change, Sunak will tell voters. Refer you back to the Mirror and the 13 years of Conservative rule. We are told by Stephen Swinford, their political editor, and Oliver Wright, their policy editor, Rishi Sunak is planning to go big. His conference speech tomorrow will be more than 40 minutes long, and according to those familiar with it, as in they've seen sight of it, no doubt, packed with new policies. The Prime Minister is expected to make announcements on education, banning smoking and HS2 as he sets out his long-term plans for Britain. And those are just the announcements that have been leaked. We'll remember some of them, won't we? There are said to be many others. The conference speech represents a key moment in Sunak's premiership. The strategy is simple. Before he left for his summer holidays, there were frank discussions in Number 10, an acknowledgement the present approach wasn't working. Voters were not giving the government credit for falling inflation. The polls were barely moved. So the intention to gear up to this autumn was to assert that he is the candidate for change.
Well, I mean, I have to say, this is the conference for the post-truth age, isn't it? I mean, we've got... The slogan is long-term decisions for a brighter future, and those decisions are: we're going to cancel HS2, and we're not going to push back our net zero.
And we've got
target.
a raft of policies that we've just thrown at the wall, and the ones that stick there, they'll be the policies that we'll go with.
Telegraph, let's have a look. Sunak, I'll change the status quo.
Yes.
The PM promises to tackle a broken political system in a series of big calls before the election.
I mean, he's not, you know, he's sort of right on this. I think that the public are sort of a bit irritated by the way that it has been going on, but it's very difficult for a Conservative, an incumbent Conservative Prime Minister, to try to make that separation. I happen to think that a lot of this, you know, a lot of these policies that are being thrown out, they are slightly, they're not very well aligned in that they are sort of trying to appeal to a broad church of voters, because of course that's what Boris Johnson was very good at doing. That's why he got his majority, by appealing to lots of different voters that the Tories weren't able to do before. I think he's trying to do something similar, but I think he's been stung by the Labour accusations of being inactive, of being a Prime Minister to whom things happen. And he has his 5 pledges, and he can't quite get them to work because, oh, there's a war over here, there's a pandemic, and it's not my fault.
That wasn't always the way, was it? He tried to sort out the Northern Ireland questions.
But I think that's been
framework.
I think that's been the perception, and so that's why I think a lot of this is desperate, frantic, trying to be the man who is active, and it's just not really working.
I'm sorry, this is an overused word. I've used it on this press preview too much with regards to the Tory party, but it is Kafkaesque. People call it gaslighting. You can call it Kafkaesque. There's a line here in the Telegraph that's been leaked that Sunak is going to say tomorrow. It isn't an anger, it's an exhaustion with politics. In particular, politicians saying things and then nothing ever changing. And you know what? People are right. Politics doesn't work the way it should. This is a government that has been defined by what it's saying it's not going to do, what it's cancelling, what it's pushing back in terms of net zero, in terms of HS2, and then making claims, and in terms of meat taxes, which they were never going to do anyway, and they're making claims that the Labour Party are going to do things.
I heard that somebody said it might have been mentioned, but anyway, do.
But, you know, this is an entire administration over 13 years and increasingly since Brexit that has been characterised by people, this post-truth era of people's, you know, claiming things that are just, that were never the case. And this idea that people are exhausted with politics and with nothing ever changing from somebody who has been defined. The definition of his politics is saying he's not going to do things rather than what he really is going to do.
I'm trying to find the change in the Telegraph article, to be fair. First of all, he will say he will change 30 years of status quo in politics and will bill Sir Keir Starmer as the continuity candidate. Interestingly, the change policies, I'm afraid they have been leaked, a lot of them. Moves considered in recent weeks, scrapping A-levels, we know that. Further action to crack down on poor quality university degrees, it's been mooted for months, I think. And new anti-smoking measures, which we've also heard about. Mr Sunak will say there is the undeniable sense that politics just doesn't work the way it should. Well, people will sit there and go, well, whose fault is that?
Yeah, I think that that's the key thing. And I mean, again, I have some sympathy for Rishi Sunak because he did inherit a real dumpster fire from Liz Truss. And thanks so much to her. She's made a comeback and people seem to have forgotten all about that. Some people still hark back to Boris Johnson. But ultimately, he was part of at least one of those governments. So he does bear a lot of responsibility. And even if one were to say, I'm sympathetic towards Rishi Sunak, as a sort of a party, generally, I think people have just had enough of a series of broken promises, of changing in different directions, and that's the sense. Even if he promises all of these different things, as nice as they sound, I don't think people trust him to actually follow through on the things that work.
Alison Pearson on the front of the Telegraph here, who says,
Oh,
I'm a Tory and I want them to lose the next election. That's what she said. I mean, I would say, in fairness to Rishi Sunak, it has been mooted today that he has said that he's going to spend billions on roads and he's going to spend billions on buses with the money saved from HS2. That's something new, and I'm sure he's going to trumpet that a lot tomorrow, because you've got to remember that they managed to retain the seat of Uxbridge in the by-election by 480 votes over some road-related campaigning, and he thinks, oh, people like us when we say we're on the side of the motorists. This is desperate stuff. When you're looking for vision and something positive, that this is what Rishi Sunak stands for, in a conference that has been completely overshadowed by leaked news and him petulantly being angry about being asked about things that he's going to announce the very next day.
Yeah, well, there we are. That's the front of The Guardian. PM declares politics broken in a bid to wrest back control, but the woman at the bottom there, you know, she stole the show today, let's be honest about it. Well pitched for the audience, well spoken, well delivered.
Yeah.
Was it her... Who described it as that? Her bid, it was the eye, wasn't it, I think? Was it
so.
her bid to be the leader?
It's quite clear that that is what she's gearing up for, and that's why I say everybody's sort of assuming that Rishi Sunak has got one foot out the door, because it has just been a free-for-all of different people sort of putting themselves forward. And, you know, you could just reel off the list of names. But I think, in particular, Suella Braverman is interesting because actually being in the Home Office is not necessarily the best start if you want to be Prime Minister, because you're very unlikely to leave with a positive track record. Priti Patel found that as well, and it's interesting that she's been sort of positioning herself diametrically opposed to Suella Braverman, but I actually think Patel understands that she's probably not going to be leader. I think she's trying to sort of set her up as almost a second, as sort of a kingmaker possibility. I think that there is a lot of jockeying going on behind the scenes. I don't know whether or not Suella Braverman really could pull it off and become the next Tory party leader. I just don't think that they can be that foolish to think that she'd be that popular broadly.
But the bigger question is, where does it go? Does it lurch to the right, and use those in inverted commas? Because the right has done well, has it not?
But what is the right in the Tory party? Because you've got one side of the Tory party saying we're all for low taxes and big growth and personal freedom, and then on the other hand you have people saying yes, but we want a strong border and we want to send everybody home and we want police on every corner. And this is the problem, actually, is that there isn't sort of this homogenous group called the Conservative Party who believe one thing. They believe all sorts of different things, and that is why we are seeing all the infighting. That's why governments can't last more than a couple of years.
Meanwhile, you have the image of them all flirting with Nigel Farage and dancing around with him last night. And, you know, today the rhetoric was all about, is he going to rejoin the Conservative Party, you know?
To which he said, absolutely not.
Yeah, Farage,
yes, but Rishi Sunak said, well, we're a broad church.
But Farage is a great judge of political moods, and he says these people have got nothing to offer. And I think most people looking at this would say, yeah, actually, they don't have anything new to offer.
Yeah, well, there's the Daily Mail. They absolutely loved it. What a wig lifter. Quentin Letts on the Suella speech that's got the Liberal elite having palpitations. We'll end our discussion of it there because we've got lots more to pack in the second half of our programme, including more of the stories. Like the Telegraph, the headline, Johnson's COVID decisions were bipolar. That from Balance. Back in a moment. Well, welcome back. You are watching the press preview with me once again, journalist and broadcaster Jenny Kleeman, and the political commentator Benedict Spence. Welcome back to both of you. So the second COVID inquiry module started today. Valence's diaries, it's on the top of a number of newspapers, including this line from the Daily Telegraph. Johnson's COVID decisions were bipolar. Benedict.
I think that this is... I don't want to say it's something that is sort of already known, but it's certainly something I think that is already suspected, that actually in those sort of early days of the pandemic, there was a lot of haphazard responses to how the pandemic was going to be handled. There was a set of protocols for how to handle an influenza outbreak, how to handle a coronavirus outbreak, and actually there was a lot of sort of hopping to and fro based on one set of assumptions that were then very quickly reversed. So I think to say that...
Or a slightly libertarian attitude of the Prime Minister,
yes,
and then be corrected by his science.
Well, I mean, a lot of people always go on about Sweden being the model. That was the model that actually the UK was supposed to follow, and then the decision was changed. And, we can argue now about the outcome, about whether or not that would have been
The
justified.
herd immunity debate.
Well, I mean, the thing that I always think is right at the start, we were told masks were a bad idea. You shouldn't have masks, they'll have no effect. And almost within sort of 24, 48 hours, about a week in, it was, oh, no, actually, you should absolutely all wear masks. And, well, we're not quite sure if we need or have time to explain. But now it's changed. Now it has changed. And it was that kind of attitude, which was you just sort of went with what you were told because nobody really knew anything outside of Downing Street. Apparently not many people knew what was going on inside Downing Street. This is all just going to keep on coming out. The chaos that we all suspected was there. And
the lateness as well.
Exactly, yeah.
And, details coming out today. And this is, of course, we all have skin in this game. We all gave up our freedom and trusted the politicians of what they were telling.
Or had people die.
Or had people die. And, the idea of sage being used as human shields and yet evidence from sage being cherry-picked, the idea of there being feuding, a toxic atmosphere within Number 10. And it's so ironic, given the disdain for the facts and for truth and that the government has shown since then, the fact that the scientists were being sort of pushed to the front and made to take the heat for decisions that were being made. The idea that Patrick Vallance was so uncomfortable at the time is really interesting. There's just going to be more and more as this rolls on. And this is the part of the inquiry that I think is going to be particularly fascinating.
OK, as we wait for the WhatsApp messages as well, certainly. Both of you, thank you very much indeed. Jenny, Benedict, thank you. See you for more in the 11, of course.